Hi, this is General Biology, and this is Bio131, and this is Chapter 1. Chapter 1 is basically an introduction. We are going to go through, in this chapter, generally speaking, we're going to go through the introduction regarding the properties of life, what is needed to consider this is something alive, and what the levels of life, the major themes, investigations, the variables, the different things that will come one after one. In this first part of chapter one, we will go through these first part. Generally speaking, what's life? Life is basically um, certain things that you will see, and when you apply these properties, you can say that this is actually life and this something is actually alive. So what are these properties? This is what we're going to go through. And generally speaking, life is these properties that are shared by all living things. It's the different properties that you need to know. We will go through them, and you have to remember it. When you see these properties combined, you can say that this something, whether it is a human being, it's animal, it's microorganism, whatever it is, you can say it is alive or not. Um, and the most important thing is that you have to display all these properties combined. Display properties combined. You have to have all of those. You can't have one of those only and say this is life or this is alive. So what are these properties that are important to remember? Number one, it's the order. Each living thing have a complex but well ordered structure. So you have to go through the structure like cell, organ, or from organelle, cell, and so on. You go up. There is a specific order that all organisms that's considered living they should share. Order. Number two, energy and matter processing. The organism will take energy and it's going to convert it into usable forms, and then you expel the energy. So how are you going to handle the energy, and how are you going to process the matter? So each one of those that we consider them living things or alive should utilize energy, take it, and convert it into different things. Like you are alive as human, you are taking the energy from food, for example, and then you're going to use this energy to make proteins, to build your body, to your muscles, and so on. You're going to make different things and utilizing in different ways, which is you're using the energy and matter and processing the matter. Number three is reproduction. These organisms, to be considered alive, they have to be able to reproduce, and look at this, their own kind on themselves. They should be, you need to remember here that not just reproduce on your own, reproduce yourself on your own. You should be able also, another property, that you should be able to go to do growth and development. You should be able to grow and develop, and these are information that are carried by genes that will control the pattern of growth of all organisms. How are you going to grow? How your different organs are going to grow? This is all coded on different genes that will exactly decide how you're going to grow. Like you grow different than the animal, different than the plant. The genes in the plant is going to tell the plants you need to grow vertically, you need to become thicker, and so on. You are going to grow, become taller, and so on. So these are all encoded in genes. So remember, so far you have to have an order, Number two, energy and matter processing. Number three, you should be able to reproduce on your own, and you should be able to grow and develop. You should be also able, which is number five, respond to energy. Um, all organisms should be able to respond to energy in certain ways. Um, these responses will enable you uh, to survive, and it's going to keep your internal environment within a narrow limit. What does it mean? Meaning, just take one thing as an example. Your body temperature normally should be 37, around 37, plus or minus a little bit, like zero point 0.2, which is 98.6 as an average, plus or minus also. So this range, which is, we say 98.6, so let's say 98.4 to 98.8, and so on. So there is a range. Or if you say 37, you can say 36.5 to 37.5. This is the normal range or the normal limits. So you should be able to respond to the environment to keep your internal environment within that range. Let's say your pH. The pH is 7.35. Your pH of your blood 7.35. Plus or minus, everything will go within a narrow limit. Narrow limit. It's not a big limit. So how can you keep it within that range? This is your response to environment. You have to have this property in order to be considered alive. Response to environment. So what are you going to do if it's getting hot? Is your body temperature will go up to 100 or 101 or 102? Of course not. It should be kept within that range. This will be determined by your response. So you go into a colder spot, you turn on the air condition, you use a fan, put some water, do whatever you want in order to keep within the narrow limits. So this is 5 so far. And then the next one is evolutionary adaptation. Adaptations occur through evolution. So that the traits means properties or different characteristics. They evolve over generations, thousands and hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of generations. They reproduce, and a certain trait develop on these or in these organisms, whatever you want to call it, animals, anything. And the ones that have this trait that enable them to cope and survive, it's the next generation will have this heritable trait, and it will continue. Example of that is these elephants with thin ears, thin and broad. This is an evolution. So if you look at their ancestors, it will look it's smaller and a little bit thicker, but it happened like this because elephants usually live in hot environments. So in order to cope, they they evolve these traits. The trait here is the big, thin ear. So those who develop this trait is going to pass it on. So why is that a good trait to be um, passed from generation to generation? Because it's hot. So when they have a big surface and when they have a thin air, that will enable them to lose heat easily, so that they can control their body temperature and they can lower it. And because if the body temperature is not kept within the normal range, you will not survive. Elephants will not survive. You have to keep everything. We call it homeostasis. It will. This is something that will be coming soon in other chapters. But homeostasis is what we're talking about right now, which is keeping everything within the normal range, the normal narrow range. So these are the properties. You need to memorize and remember all these properties, because if I give you an example of something, you need to apply these properties and see if you have it or not. If and remember, you have to have it combined. You didn't tell me that I found one or two or three, so I would consider this life or I consider this alive. That does not happen like this. You have to have these combined. So if we apply that to the virus, does the virus have these properties that we talked about? Yes, it have a lot of those, but not all of them. That's why I said combined. You have to have all of them. So the virus have a high order. It go from small to large. So the order is there. This is one. They evolve, obviously. Example is the flu virus, for example. It evolved. The older flu virus was different, and it was weaker than that. So it evolved. So you have order and evolution. That's two. Number three, they can infect a wide range of organisms, but they cannot reproduce on their own. This is your clue here. On their own. So you can argue that the virus can reproduce. How? You say, okay, few viruses infected me, and then inside my body they are reproducing, and now I have tens of thousands of these viruses, so they are reproducing. I will ask you, do you consider virus alive? Do you think the virus reproduced on their own? No. The answer is no. They did not reproduce on their own. They are lacking the machinery that help them to reproduce on their own. Meaning, if I give you a virus in the lab and I tell you you have this virus, leave it alone and just feed it, give it the essential elements and show me how it's going to reproduce, nothing is going to happen. It's not going to reproduce. Why? Because they need to get into the cells. Whether we're talking about human or animal or anything, they have to get into the body, they have to get into the cells, and they're going to use the machinery of the cells, which is the nucleus with the chromosomes and DNA and all of that. They're going to occupy, literally, they occupy the nucleus, and they control the nucleus, and they are going to order the nucleus or order the DNA and the chromosomes to make copies of themselves somehow. We will get into the details later on, but the bottom line is they are using the machinery of the cells. Can you reproduce on your own? Can the virus reproduce on their own? No, they cannot. They can use other things, other cells. They can use other machineries, yes, but this is not your own. So the bottom line is the virus is not considered alive, even though there is a lot of debate about that between biologists. Some of them will say, okay, as long as it can reproduce, that should be fine, and others will say, no, it cannot be reproduced on their own. So they said, okay, let's keep it between the two states. It's in between, something in the middle, between the living organisms and non-living chemicals. But for the purpose of general biology, for the purpose of this course, consider virus not alive. The bottom line, we are leaning towards this big group of biologists, or this big section of biologists that agree that the virus is not alive. Most importantly, because they cannot reproduce on their own. Now the next part is the levels that we see on Earth. So the largest is the biosphere, which is everything on Earth. Within the biosphere, and this order is extremely important, you need to remember it as well, because I can give you any sequence of those and ask you what is the right sequence or what does each one of those means. So this is something important to know. So the biosphere is everything on Earth, all life on Earth, whatever you see on Earth. And then within the biosphere you have the ecosystem, which is living and non-living. You have different ecosystems. Within the ecosystems you will have communities, different communities. These different communities, they are going to interact. The communities consist of populations that they're going to interact with each other within the ecosystem. So you can say the community of animals. This is a community. Each member of this community is considered a population, like the population of elephants, plus the population of horses, plus the population of lions and dogs and cats and so on. So the whole thing here is considered a community of animals, but each one of those animals is considered a population. So the population is, the key point is species. It's one species. So you can say the population of monkeys, the population of dogs. So it's one species only. So this is your clue here. Community is different populations within the ecosystem, and different population means different species. If you go to one population, it will be one species only. So the example of that, of the community, is animals, plants, anyone. The example of population is one species only: dogs, cats, monkeys, and so on. If you're talking about plants, you will see the community is plants, and then the population is peach trees is a population, apple tree is a population, and so on. The next level, so we're talking about one species now. So let's say a population which is a population of elephants. This is one species of which is elephants. So if you take one elephant, we call that an organism, individual living being. Within that organisms, you have different organ systems. Like if I have this elephant, what does it consist of on a large scale? It consists of cardiovascular system, digestive system, respiratory system, urinary system, reproductive system, and so on. We call each one of those the organ system. The organ system is a group of organs that work together. Group of different organs. Like if you say, what's the organ system of like the digestive system as an organ system? It consists of different organs, group of organs that work together. A stomach is an organ, a liver is an organ, intestine is an organ. So the organ system consists of different organs that work together. Now the organ itself, like in this case, if you're saying the cardiovascular system, the heart is an organ, the vein is an organ, the artery is an organ, and so on. So I'll take one of these, which is the heart. The heart is an organ. And this organ, if you go deeper, it consists of different tissues. You have to memorize this sequence from the highest, from the biosphere, all the way down. So we're talking about the organism that consists of different tissues. What's a tissue? It's an integrated group of similar cells that work together. So you're taking a piece of the heart and you call that tissue. Like I'm taking part of the muscles of the left ventricle. This is a tissue, which consists of a group of cells working together. Within the tissue consists of different cells, and the cells is the fundamental unit of life. So remember this, cell is the smallest that you can go, is the fundamental unit of life. But actually, if you go within the cells, you will see different organelles. These are the components within the cells, like the mitochondria is an organelle, Golgi apparatus, the membrane, the cell membrane, the nucleus. These are all organelles. So the cell consists of different organelles, but can you consider the organelles the fundamental unit of life? No, you cannot. So this is the fundamental unit of life. This is the lowest that you can go, but you need to understand what the cells consist of. So it consists of organelles. If you go to one organelle and see what does it consist of, the organelle consists of different molecules. Example, the cell consists of different organelles, including nucleus, Golgi apparatus, mitochondria, cell membrane, and so on. If I take one of those, like the mitochondria, what the mitochondria consists of? It consists of different molecules. So if you look inside the organelle, I would see molecules. What are the molecules? The molecule consists of different atoms that are bonded together, atoms with bond. And the atom is the fundamental unit of matter. Do not confuse the fundamental unit of life with the fundamental unit of matter. So you can say, can I consider the atom, this is the smallest now, can I consider the atom as the fundamental unit of life? No, it's not alive. The cell is the smallest, because if you have one of those by itself, if you have an atom, can the atom reproduce? No. Can the cell reproduce? Yes. So if you apply the rules to the cell, to one cell only, all of them can work, like all these properties that you talked about. So if you go under the cells, it is a substructure, but it's not considered alive by itself. You have to have the whole entire cell, and from that cell you can reproduce on their own. So if I give you an atom, can it reproduce? Of course not. How about we put atoms together and make a molecule? Can that reproduce? Of course not. If I put molecules together and make an organelle, can the organelle reproduce? Can I give you mitochondria and ask you to make this one mitochondria 10? Of course not, you cannot. But can the cell reproduce and make more cells? Yes, it can. That's why we call it the smallest. So this 12 is important, going from the biosphere to the ecosystem to the community to the population, which is one species. Community is different species. To the organism, to the organ system, to the organ, to the tissue, to the cell, and this is the fundamental unit. And then within the cells you have organelles that consist of molecules, that consist of atoms, which is a fundamental unit of matter, that have the properties of the matter. Meaning, what if you go inside the atom? What are you going to see? You will see protons, neutrons, and electrons. Why don't we consider the electrons as a fundamental unit of matter? Because electrons does not have the properties of the matter. Like if I have an atom of water, for example, the atom of water, or the atom of oxygen. The atom of oxygen is oxygen. It still have the properties of oxygen. But if you get the electron within, it does not have any properties. It does not have the properties of oxygen. It's just an electron. It doesn't mean anything. So the atom is a fundamental unit of matter that have its properties. This is important to add. That have its properties. So the atom of oxygen have the properties of oxygen. The atom of hydrogen have the properties of hydrogen, and so on. If you go smaller than that, it's not a fundamental unit of matter, because it does not keep the properties of that matter. Now, if you look to life in general, you will see some unifying things and some diversifying things. So life have both unity and diversity at the same time. There are things that in common and things that are diverse. So there are things in common and things that are diverse. So if you're studying biology, there are different themes that we're going to focus on. So if you understand these themes, you're going to organize and you make sense of the information that we are talking about. So we're going to be talking about the information flow, structure and function, the evolution, and the interconnection, and the last one is energy and matter pathways. We're going to go through all of these, and these are the different themes that we're going to apply and use. Energy and matter pathway, which is this one. Any activities of the cells, which is the fundamental unit of life. So all activities will need energy and matter. So for your cells to survive, you need to give the cells energy, which is in the form of ATP, and you should give them matter. Matter is something like amino acids, fatty acids, and so on. So they take monosaccharides, glucose, for example. You have to give the cells glucose, which is the matter, and you give them some energy, and they are going to utilize those in order to build and replace and keep alive. So you need to have both of them. The cells need to have both of them. These are the fundamentals. This is the minimum. If you lost energy, if you don't have energy, the cells will die. If you don't have the matter, the cells are going to die. If you look at life in general, and if you're talking about the biosphere, it's the sun that give it's the source of energy to the whole ecosystem. So it starts from the sun. So if you're saying like, but I don't use sun. Animals do not use it. Yes, but you're eating animals, and animals are eating plants, and plants are getting the energy from the sun. So if you take it back all the way, you're going back to the sun anyway. So the sun is the energy that drives all ecosystem. If the sun is not there, nobody will survive, basically. Because if the sun is not there, the plants are going to die, animals will not find the plants, you will not find plants, and animals will die, you will not find plants or animals to eat. So the whole life is going to finish without sun. Next part is the interconnection within and in between the levels of biological system, which is this interconnection. So you're going to study life from the microscopic level, which is the smallest, until the global level. So you're going up level after level after level, and in each level you will see emerging properties that does not it was not there in the lower level. So example of that is cells. Cells have different properties. They can reproduce. Was that something that was there on the level of the organelles? No, it was not. Was it there on the level of the molecules or atoms? No. So when you go to the level of atom, for example, and then you go up to the molecules, you're adding properties. From you go from molecules to organelles. The organelles can do certain functions that the atoms cannot do. And then you go from the organelles to the next level, which is the cells. The cells will have emergent properties that was not in the lower level. In this case, organelles cannot reproduce. You go to the next level, the upper level, which is the cells. The cells will acquire another property, which is reproduction. Next thing that we're talking about in the themes. So we're covering the themes now, the different themes. Information flow, structure and function, energy and matter pathway, interconnection, and evolution. We did the energy and matter pathway, we did the interconnection, and structure and function. What's the structure and function? Basically, structure is anatomy, function is physiology, meaning structure is the shape of something. Like what's the structure of the bone, for example. The bone consists of calcium and phosphorus and fibers, and or how the bone looks like, the shape. This is the structure of the bone. And function, what is it going to do? What's the structure of the stomach, and what's the function of the stomach? The structure of the stomach is it's a pouch shaped that contain muscles and contain enzymes and so on. So this is a structure. It is a muscular structure that looks like a pouch shape. This is a structure, and it consists of muscles and different things. What's the function? Digestion. So what are you going to do? What's the function? So this is structure and function, another theme. Information flow. It happened throughout all the levels, all these levels that we're talking about. So the information is encoded in genes, and it have the identical chemical language that's in all organisms. So the language and the genes in humans and animals and so on, the language is the same, that we're going to cover later on. And because of these genes that are encoded with this language, if something something wrong happened to these genes, we call it gene mutation. If it's mutated, diseases can result, because the information flow is going to simply be disrupted. And if the information flow is disrupted, somehow it's going to result in disease. And they are giving you example here. Angelina Jolie she did double mastectomy. Did she have cancer? No, she did not. But she just did some studies, gene studies, and she found out that her genes are mutated. So she know that she will ultimately have breast cancer sometime in her life. So she decided to remove her mammary gland or her breast as a prevention now. Mastectomy, mast means breast, ectomy means to cut. Mastectomy is to cut. Double mastectomy means cut both sides, right and left. So this is an example of interruption of the information flow. Last one is evolution. And evolution depends most importantly on natural selection. So this is a unifying theme of evolution, natural selection. So how does it happen, or what actually happened? There is a gradual modification from generation to generation, from ancestral species to the modern day species. So they evolved and they acquired some characteristics that will stay with them. So I will give you just an example, like the bacteria. There are different types of bacteria that evolved to be antibiotic resistant, meaning when the penicillin, for example, when they discovered the penicillin can kill certain types of bacteria, completely wipe it off in the beginning. So what happened is somehow some of these bacteria, few of these bacteria that receive the antibiotics, something happened to their genes in the chromosomes, and they somehow acquired the ability to resist the antibiotics. So then you're taking the antibiotics are wiping off all the bacteria in the beginning, not those that have this type of mutation. This type of good mutation, it's good for the bacteria, of course, not for us. We would love that the bacteria does not have any evolution so we can wipe it off, but this is not reality. The reality is that it does happen to everything. Evolution does happen to everything that's alive. So what happened to those is some of these bacteria somehow mutation happened. It's a good mutation to them. Only few of those got this mutation, and because of the mutation they were able to resist the antibiotics. So all of these bacteria died except for those few that acquire this. So those are going to be naturally selected to continue, and the rest that does not have is going to die, and it's not going to continue. Not all of them, but most of them. But those that were naturally selected to continue are going to reproduce. So now we can say you cannot use penicillin at all for this kind of bacteria, for example. Why? Because they evolved and they become completely resistant, or 90% resistant. So it's useless. And so on. So you can apply that to a lot of things that evolved, and when they evolved, they acquired a certain property that helped them to cope with life changes, and those that acquired this ability were naturally selected to continue because of this evolution that happened to them, and the rest is going to disappear. So you see a lot of species right now that was not there before, and you see things like dinosaurs, for example. They could not do evolution in order to continue to cope with life that's changing years after years, generations after generations. So they disappeared. Certain ancestors of the elephants that live in hot spots, for example, they cannot survive because they don't have this big ear that's thin. So they are going to die because of the heat, or because of the hot weather. And those that acquired this big ears, they survived. They were naturally selected to survive, and so on. And this applied to a lot of things, which is the evolution. And this was the last part of the themes in biology that you need to know. And this is part 1 of chapter 1. Next time we will do part 2 of chapter 1.